26 अक्टूबर कश्मीर विलय दिन के अवसर पर ऑक्युपाइड टेरिटरी ऑफ इंडिया इस विषय पर कश्मीर स्टडी सेंटर मुंबई की ओर से चर्चा सत्र का आयोजन किया गया। इसमें प्रमुख वक्ता थे कैप्टन आलोक बंसल जी।
Evening and प्यार भरा नमस्कार to all. I'm Advocate Saloni Ghule, your host for the evening, and we're starting our program on the occupied territories of India, another very sensitive topic for us on behalf of Jammu Kashmir Study Center, Mumbai Mahanagar. I will request Dr. Sharda to deliver a message that he has joined us to deliver. Dr. Sharda, please.
Namaskar, everybody. We are having a very important conversation today. But before that, there is a sad news. Shri Arun Kumar ji, the patron and the guidance philosopher for Jammu Kashmir Study Center, has lost his respected father. As you all know, Arun ji is like a family. He is the one who has worked for years in Jammu Kashmir, and he is instrumental in making this totally path-breaking approach to Jammu Kashmir issue since he took over this task. And what we see today is we can say a major contribution to that is Arunji's own effort, where he has created a team and done some wonderful research and guided the people. So for us, his bereavement is as good as our own family's bereavement, or as bad as our own family's bereavement. So we pray to God that he gains strength to take care of himself in this dire time when losing a parent is one of the most painful time in one's family. And may his family also gain strength to fight this separation. And we pray to God that his respected father's soul gains Sadgati at the feet of the Supreme Being. To convey our condolences, we'll have 1 minute silence before we start the program. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.
Alok ji.
Thank you.
Unmute,
It's always an honor to speak to audience in Mumbai.
A little louder, Alok ji, we can hear you.
Today has been just finish this. The topic that's been given to me by Shakti ji is occupied territories of Bharat. Sorry, I think it is occupied territories of India, which I would put it. And when we talk of occupied territories of India, we need to understand that while we have disputes with some of our neighbors all over, bulk of these territories are in Jammu and Kashmir. When we talk of Pakistan, Pakistan has occupied certain territories in Jammu and Kashmir. But besides that, we have only territorial dispute on Sarkri, which is a water body. We don't have any major territorial dispute with Pakistan outside Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. When we talk of China, China has a major dispute with us, even on Arunachal Pradesh, but most of the territory is with us. China has made some small incursions, but most of the occupied territories, most of the territory that China disputes in Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand or Arunachal is in our possession. So the bulk of the territory that China has occupied as far as India is concerned is in Ladakh. Similarly, we have minor differences on territorial disputes with Nepal. We have certain delineation which has to be done with Myanmar. With Bangladesh, we have resolved our border dispute completely. With Sri Lanka, we have resolved it completely. We have no disputes with Maldives. We have no disputes with Thailand, with which we share boundary. We have no dispute with Indonesia. So all these countries with which we share either land boundary or maritime boundary, we have delineated it, and more or less there is no dispute, barring some small ones which I have told you. As you know, Nepal was in picture. So bulk of the dispute that we have, the bulk of India's territory that have been occupied by foreign powers are in the former princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, and which are now the union territories of Jammu and Kashmir and union territories of Ladakh. And this is, of course, the map that you know. The new map of this particular region is the UT of Ladakh and UT of Jammu and Kashmir. But we need to understand, as far as this territory is concerned, there are parts which are occupied by Pakistan, there are parts which are occupied by China. But very often people don't understand what is claimed by all. See, because occupation is different, what is claimed is different. And this is what I wanted to show you, this particular map. And this is what is very important. The first map is what the state is today. You have administered region, you have a Pak administered, Pak occupied Kashmir, Pak occupied Ladakh, you have Indian administered, or what we call as Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. Then you have the Chinese controlled, or what China has occupied, Aksai Chin, etc. Now, as far as we are concerned, the entire Jammu and Kashmir, entire Ladakh is constitutionally, legally our part. And this is what we have shown it. Now, what Pakistan claims is, Pakistan claims the entire former princely state of Jammu and Kashmir as its territory, barring those areas which the China claims. And Chinese claim, of course, are restricted to those areas which China occupied or claims somewhat in Ladakh area. So this 4 different aspects we must understand clearly. Now, this is how the former Jammu and Kashmir used to look like, who has occupied what. I have generally explained it to you. This is the area which you have occupied by Pakistan, which is divided into 2 parts. One is known as Mirpur Muzaffarabad, which Pakistan likes to call it AJK or Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Now the new nomenclature for this is Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And this area, which is now Gilgit-Baltistan, we can call it Pakistan occupied territory of Ladakh. Then here you have the Shaksgam Valley, which has been ceded by Pakistan to China. This is Aksai Chin area, including Demchok. You have Siachen Glacier here, which Pakistan contests. We have an active border here. And this is again with India's control. So this is how the former map of Jammu and Kashmir looks like before the division. But there is a big difference. You have certain territories which are under Pakistan's occupation. There are certain territories under China's occupation. But the two occupations by foreign powers is slightly different. Now, with Pakistan, we have a dispute in Ladakh and Jammu, which is perceived as a territorial dispute, because as I showed you, Pakistan claims virtually the entire territory, barring those which China claims. Of course, that is also they have relinquished after 63. Before 63, they used to claim even that territory. That is after Sino-Pak agreement. But with China, the dispute is a boundary dispute. China does not say that entire Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh belongs to us. China only says that the boundary goes from here, and we say boundary goes from here. The total area which is under Pakistan's occupation is over 78,000 square kilometers, whereas the total area which is under Chinese occupation is over 37,000 square kilometers. In addition, over 5,000 square kilometers of Shaksgam Valley has also been ceded by Pakistan to China under their Sino-Pak agreement of 1963. Now, why I am giving approximates is that there are certain areas where the boundary, the line of actual control are not delineated properly. I'll come to that subsequently. Now, Pakistan has a territory which has got a vibrant population. It's got over 5 million people living here. Whereas the territory which China has occupied is virtually uninhabited. There is, of course, a small isolated village of Demchok and then certain PLA stations which have come up. But what is even more important is that the line of control with Pakistan from the international border up to a point which is known as 9842, NJ 9842, from where Siachen Glacier emanates, is delineated on map and demarcated on ground. That means you know that territory beyond that is ours, but this is what is the line of control. That means the position where the two respective forces are there is identified and clearly delineated. But with China, the line of actual control is neither delineated on map nor demarcated on ground. As a result, there are different perceptions. We believe that line of actual control passes through this area. They believe line of actual control passes through this area. And as a result, you have what is known as overlapping patrols, where their patrols come into our territory and our patrols go. And this leads to skirmishes, tensions. And now what we have seen is after so many decades, we have had loss of lives and open confrontation. Now, the territory which Pakistan has, and first I'll try to talk about this Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh. This Pakistan has divided into two parts. One is what I like to call as Mirpur Muzaffarabad, or what we can call Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir. And the other is what is Gilgit-Baltistan, or Pakistan occupied territory of Ladakh. So we have two different nomenclatures for the two territories. Mirpur Muzaffarabad is less than 15% of the territory under Pakistan's occupation. Gilgit-Baltistan is more than 85% of the territory. Gilgit-Baltistan has less than 30% of the population, whereas Mirpur Muzaffarabad has more than 70% of the population. But what is important is that Pakistan tries to project Mirpur Muzaffarabad as an independent sovereign entity. It has given an external facade of an independence. It's called AJK, Azad Jammu and Kashmir. Whereas Gilgit-Baltistan has been treated as a virtual colony, had no constitutional status till 2009, and till recently enjoyed no democratic institutions. Next, Mirpur Muzaffarabad has by and large been culturally assimilated into Pakistan, whereas Gilgit-Baltistan has a very, very rich pre-Islamic culture and enormous linguistic and cultural diversity. Now, both these territories are being infiltrated by radical Islamists. In fact, large number of insurgent outfits have their camps in Mirpur Muzaffarabad. You have Lashkar-e-Toiba, Jamaat-ud-Dawa, etc. You know, all these infiltrations that take place virtually in Jammu and Kashmir come from these places, and there are camps all over in Mirpur Muzaffarabad area. In Gilgit-Baltistan also, the radical Islam is making its move, and Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan is making its presence. During Kargil War, Lashkar-e-Toiba and its cadres were encouraged, and as a result, the sectarian conflict in this particular area has become aggravated. What is even more important is that in Mirpur Muzaffarabad, state subject rule is still inapplicable. Consequently, anybody from Pakistan cannot constitutionally become a citizen of this area, cannot go and settle down there. But in Gilgit-Baltistan, in 70s, Zulfikar Ali Bhutto had removed the state subject rule. And as a result, there is a huge migration of Pakistanis coming and settling down in Gilgit-Baltistan, thereby changing the demography of this region. And consequently, you'll see that the population has grown inordinately in Gilgit-Baltistan, whereas it's not grown so in Mirpur Muzaffarabad. What is even more important is that the latest census which has taken place in Pakistan, the entire Pakistan's figures have been declared, even Mirpur Muzaffarabad's figures have been declared, but the figures for Gilgit-Baltistan have still not been declared. The reason is the inordinate increase will be difficult to justify, and it will cause discontentment. In Mirpur Muzaffarabad, Pakistan built what is known as Bhasha Dam, which has inundated large tracts of this territory, and the irrigation water is supplied to Pakistan. This area has been inundated to provide irrigation water to Pakistan. The territory that has been flooded is our territory, constitutionally, legally, but the benefits are being derived by Pakistani. Now, similarly in Gilgit-Baltistan, now they are actually constructing Bhasha Dam, which will again inundate territory in Gilgit-Baltistan, but will provide irrigation facilities and power to Pakistan. As a result, what you find is that there is resentment in both these territories against Pakistan, but the resentment in Mirpur Muzaffarabad has been relatively muted in terms of percentage of population. In Gilgit-Baltistan, the resentment against Pakistan has been far more intense and far more large scale. I'll now briefly cover POJK, what is known as Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir, or Mirpur Muzaffarabad. As I said, it is called Azad Jammu and Kashmir by Pakistan. We did not have an official term for this territory till 5th August 2019. Now, restructuring of Jammu and Kashmir has now given it a clear-cut term that Pakistan occupied Jammu and Kashmir is what Pakistan calls AJK. Earlier, we had an ambiguity. It's been divided into 3 divisions. Each division, the districts are given here. You can see it. As I said, Pakistanis cannot become legally citizens of this part. And they always say a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you need to see how this area looks. This is, of course, Mangala Dam. This is the dam which I told submerged a territory. It submerged a city. There was a city called Mirpur which got completely submerged, and a new Mirpur city was constructed. Now, this is very important. Why this is important is because this Mirpur city, the people who lived here, Mirpuris, used to travel across the world. They were actually the stokers. The stokers in steamships used to be those who used to lift coal and throw it into the furnace. So these stokers were from Mirpur, because as you know, between First World War and Second World War, most of the ships that plied the oceans were steamships fired by coal. And at that point of time, Hindus had a taboo about going across oceans. They thought they would lose their faith. So people were reluctant. So Muslims were more keen, and the people from this part went there and they traveled all over the world. They had seen the world. So what happened when this dam was built? Their city got submerged, they got compensation, and a new city was created. They had no emotional bonding for the new place where they had gone. Since already they had seen the world, they started migrating. And today you have a huge Mirpuri diaspora in UK. And that's why you find that in UK, very often you have Kashmiri protests against India. This is led by this Mirpuri diaspora, led by Lord Nazir and all these people. They are from Mirpur. This is the area. This is another picture of Mirpur, Muzaffarabad, just to give you an idea how this terrain looks. This is the map of Mirpur, Muzaffarabad. As I said, it has a facade of independence. It has its prime minister. It has its president. But how independent it is, you will come to know that the prime minister of this particular area has been charged with sedition by Pakistan for listening to a speech by Nawaz Sharif. So he has been charged by sedition. So this is the head. In the past, president of this area have been arrested and put behind bars. This area also has an assembly which has 45 directly elected and 8 indirectly elected members. Now this is interesting. Out of these 45 directly elected members, only 33 get elected from here. Now 6 seats are reserved for people who have migrated from Kashmir and live in rest of Pakistan. And similarly, 6 seats are reserved for people from Jammu region who have migrated from this area and live in rest of Pakistan. Now, why I am telling this is important is because we also have a large Kashmiri Pandit population living in the rest of India. We could also have a provision. We also have people who have migrated from POJK and are living in different parts of India. We could also have a provision for an assembly seats for them. The 8 indirectly elected seats, 5 are for ladies, 1 each for cleric, 1 is for people abroad, and 1 is for technocrat. It has its own higher judiciary, Supreme Court, High Court, etc. But the judgment given by its Supreme Court has often been turned by Pakistani Supreme Court, which has no jurisdiction over it. Now they have passed recently a 13th amendment, which has further increased Islamabad's control over this particular region, and virtually anything and everything that is important is controlled from Pakistani capital. This is a picture of this place as just to show you how scenic this region is and how good it is. This is the city of Muzaffarabad. You can see there's a bend in the river. You can see this is again Neelam Valley, a picture. The languages that are spoken in this part are not spoken in Pakistan by and large. But what is important is that the Kashmiri language is spoken by a very, very minuscule part of this region. Kashmiri language is spoken by a very, very small section of people only in Neelam districts. The languages which are spoken mostly in this part are Pahadi Potwari languages, which are 3 different dialects. One is Mirpuri, the other is Pahadi, and the third is Potwari. Besides this, Hindko language is spoken, which is also spoken in Hazara division of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan, like Abbottabad, Manshera, Haripur, these districts. And the single largest language spoken is Gurjari or Gojari, which is spoken in Rajasthan, Himachal, and other parts of India. The Gujars who speak, this is spoken. Sheena is also spoken, which is spoken in Gilgit-Baltistan. Some people speak Pashto, which is spoken in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And there is also another unique language called Kundal Shahi, which is spoken in a single village in Neelam Valley, where Kundal Shahi language is spoken. This is a very, very unique language. What is even more important is that there are a lot of religious places in this particular area which have been abandoned because all Hindus and Sikhs actually left this particular place. Though there are a large number of gurdwaras and temples which have been abandoned, some have been flooded as part of Mirpur's inundation. But what is most important for us is Sharda Peeth. Sharda Peeth was a seat of learning. If you go back to ancient India and you read, Adi Shankaracharya was accepted as Jagat Guru only once he was acknowledged by the Pandits in Sharda Peeth as Jagat Guru. So Adi Shankaracharya came all the way from Kerala to Sharda Peeth. And not only that, subsequently, if you read the account by Wensang or by Ibn Battuta, they all talk of Sharda Peeth as one of the highest centers of learning. Unfortunately, post 47, this lie dilapidated, and in ruins. Very recently, I think just 2 days back, Nidhi ji told me that somebody went there, performed a puja. Ravindra Pandita ji shared a video of that. For the first time, I think since 47, 48, people went and did puja and marked a swastika symbol there. So welcome thing. We are saying that we also need to have probably a Kartarpur corridor sort of a thing till we occupy this territory, which will eventually come to us someday. But pending that, we need to have something so that people from India can go to this spiritual land of theirs, which has been traditionally ours, which has always been our part. But as I said, slowly and slowly, the resentment against Pakistan's occupation is increasing and people are been protesting. This is one of the protest rally where people are demanding independence and merger of Gilgit-Baltistan with this so-called AJK. These are again some of the pictures. You can see women in the forefront. This is another rally in Muzaffarabad. Another rally. This is a picture of market in Muzaffarabad, just to give you an idea how the town or city looks like. Now I'll come to Gilgit-Baltistan. When we used to say that Jammu and Kashmir, the former Jammu and Kashmir, was a strategically a very, very important region, the most significant part of this Jammu and Kashmir was Gilgit-Baltistan. Kashmir Valley is important, but it's not as important strategically as Gilgit-Baltistan is. This is the region which dominates all the landmass around it. And it's an extremely scenic beauty. You can see how beautiful this place looks like. These are some of the pictures just for your view. This is Atabad Raid, which was created because of glacial lake outbursts and certain landslide where a water stream has been blocked and an artificial lake has been created. This is the Karakoram highway, which connects China to Pakistan. As I said, if Gilgit-Baltistan was with us, China and Pakistan would have had no connectivity between themselves. A water canal. This is Nanga Parvat, one of the highest peaks. As I said, it is strategically the most significant part of former Jammu and Kashmir. It connects Pakistan to China. It dominates access to Pakistan, Afghanistan, China, and through them to Central Asia. Bulk of Pakistan's freshwater resources emanate from this region. It is extremely rich in mineral resources, has enormous tourism potential, and has immense hydropower potential. This is, of course, Gilgit runway. Just next to the runway, one of the aeroplane actually crashed last year, and this is a picture of that. It's divided into 14 districts. 3 divisions are there: Gilgit, Baltistan, and Daimar divisions. It's surrounded one side by Xinjiang province, Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, as it is called, Wakhan Corridor of Afghanistan, Chitral and Kohistan districts of Pakistan, besides other parts of POJK and other parts of Ladakh. What is important is that even Kohistan and Chitral at some stage were under the suzerainty of Maharaja of Jammu and Kashmir. Unfortunately, we have not claimed these areas, but there have been demands in Gilgit-Baltistan that these areas must be returned back to Gilgit-Baltistan. What is important is that 8 out of world's 25 highest peaks are located in this region, which includes K2 Godwin Austen, the second highest peak in the world. Now, this is regrettable that very often you will find in Indian textbooks that the highest Indian peak is Kanchenjunga, as if K2 Godwin Austen does not belong to us. The fact is, the highest peak on Indian territory is K2 Godwin Austen. Kanchenjunga is third highest. K2 is the second highest peak. 3 longest glaciers outside polar region are in this part of the world. 5,000 square kilometer wide Devsai Plateau at an altitude of 4,115 meters is the second highest plateau in the world. And this is some of the pictures of Devsai Plateau. You can see at 4,000 meters plus, you have this sort of a flat ground. Again, a picture of Devsai Plateau. So this is a very, very important place. The people here. Now this we need to understand that Gilgit-Baltistan traditionally has not been one territory. There were 2 parts. One was Dardistan and one was Baltistan. Dardik people have been talked of in Mahabharata, etc. because these people speak languages which are known as Dardik languages. These are of Indo-Aryan and Iranian origin. Shina, Domaki, Kohistani, Khowar, Wakhi. These are languages which are hardly spoken anywhere else in Pakistan. Besides this, they also have a language called Brushushki, which is a language isolate. And as you know, language isolate is a language which has no brother, sister, cousins. The only language of its own type, of its own family. So Brushushki is there, which is spoken in Hunza and Yasin Valley. This is a language isolate. People in Baltistan are quite different. They are Mongoloids, whereas people in Gilgit region are Dardik, who are Aryans. So in Baltistan, people speak Balti language, which is similar to what is spoken in Kargil or is spoken in Leh. It's actually, it's a language of the Tibetan group, and people are of Tibeto-Mongoloid stock, as I said. Today, virtually the entire region is 100% Muslim. But Islam came into this particular area from different times, from different regions. And as a result, you have different sects. In Hunza, which is right in the north, the people believe in Ismaili Shia faith. They are the followers of His Highness Aga Khan. In Nagar and Eastern Gilgit, people follow 12er Shia. What we call Shia normally is actually one sub-branch of Shia Islam, that is 12er Shia or Ithna Sharia. People down south, near Daimar, follow Sunni Islam. In Baltistan, most of the people are Shia faith. But there is also a smaller people who follow a Nur Bakshi faith, which is neither Shia nor Sunni. And this Nur Bakshi faith is again not found anywhere else in the world except in this part. Some people are on our side of the line of control. If you go to Turtok, Tyagshe, Bordan, etc., or where the Siachen Brigade is located, Partapur, you will find people following Nur Bakshi sect. Now, with the increase in fissures across the globe between different sects of Islam, sectarian fissures have become grave even in this part of the world. These are some of the pictures. You can see picture of Hunza Valley. Early history. Why I am talking of early history is because at this point of time, Pakistan is trying to make Gilgit-Baltistan the 5th province of its own. And what it has been trying to advocate is that Gilgit-Baltistan has never been part of Jammu and Kashmir historically. He says it's an artificial construct which the Britishers created. Nothing could be farther from truth. Gilgit-Baltistan has not only been part of Jammu and Kashmir, it has been an integral part of India whenever there was a strong empire in India. It was part of the Mauryan Empire. Ashoka introduced Buddhism here. Gilgit city is identified today by a rock carving of Lord Buddha, which is just outside Gilgit city. It was part of the Kushan Empire, like rest of the Jammu and Kashmir. Kanishka and Huvishka's coins are even today extracted in this part of the world. Similarly, when Kashmir had independent kingdoms, the largest and most powerful Kashmiri king, Lalitaditya, had Gilgit-Baltistan as his territory. His empire extended all the way from Kyrgyzstan to down below Jen. So he was the mightiest king. And his subsequent successors, Karkota dynasty, also had Gilgit-Baltistan as their part. Subsequently, when Muslim rulers came, Gilgit-Baltistan was again part of Kashmiri King Shihabuddin's kingdom. Then when the Mughal Empire came, Shah Jahan captured Baltistan in 1637. Later, his governor captured even Gilgit. So Mughal rule continued in Gilgit-Baltistan and rest of Jammu and Kashmir till 1753 when Afghans captured it. But like rest of India, whenever central authority was weak, the peripheral states broke through. So when central authority in Jammu and Kashmir or in India was weak, Gilgit-Baltistan, separate, smaller states fragmented and emerged. Of course, when Mughal rule was replaced by Afghan rules, there was huge tyranny and people started protesting against the tyrannical rules of Afghans. And the people from this area approached Maharaja Ranjit Singh that please help us, provide us liberation from this tyrannical Afghan rule. And Maharaja Ranjit Singh himself led the army and captured Srinagar in 1899. They also controlled Skardu, Astor and Kohistan. Meanwhile, Maharaja Ranjit Singh's vassal, Maharaja Gulab Singh, who was the ruler of Jammu, his General Zorawar Singh captured Leh and Baltistan for Maharaja Gulab Singh. And then, of course, subsequently, Zorawar Singh went and captured parts of Tibet, and he died finally fighting in Tibet, in Tibetan territory. Meanwhile, Colonel Nathesha, who was the commander-in-chief of The Sikh governor in Kashmir also captured Gilgit and surrounding areas. But after Maharaja Ranjit Singh's death, when this part became, Maharaja Gulab Singh became a sovereign ruler of Jammu, Kashmir, this entire state, including Gilgit-Baltistan, came under his sovereignty, his rule. And he became the undisputed ruler of this particular part. It is at this stage that in 1870s, when Russia started expanding eastward, the Tsars started capturing territory in east, the British started getting concerned about Russian move into this particular area. And that is when British tried to create what is known as Gilgit Agency. Gilgit Agency was a small area, north bank of Indus, or right bank of Indus as they call it, where they had certain British officials who were positioned there to keep an eye on what the Russians are doing. And they also had certain small amount of troops with them. Certain Kashmiri state forces were also positioned. But this agency was, as the Russian threat depleted, this agency was withdrawn in 1881. Then again, when the Russian threat again increased, they established this agency in 1889. But while this agency was established, Maharaja's forces, Maharaja's officials continued to stay in Gilgit. But in 1917, you had a Bolshevik revolution. And after Bolshevik revolution, after the First World War, the Soviet Union started expanding. And when the Soviet Union started expanding and it started moving into Central Asia, there was again a concern. And then they forced Maharaja to give certain territory on the right bank of Indus to Britishers on 60-year lease on March 26, 1935. As independence came, Britishers realized that they should not have this, so Gilgit Agency was returned to Maharaja on 1st August 1947. And Maharaja appointed his Chief of Staff, Brigadier Ghansar Singh, as the governor of this particular place. And then, of course, when Maharaja acceded to India, there was turbulence in this particular area. Certain sections of Maharaja's forces combined with Gilgit scouts and captured the governor, Brigadier Ghansar Singh. And subsequently, the commander of Gilgit Scouts, Major Brown, hoisted Pakistan's flag on 4th November, and this area became part of Pakistan. Subsequently, after capturing Gilgit in February, because the winter had descended and it's not feasible to traverse from Gilgit to Baltistan in winters, in February, they attacked Skardu. Skardu was defended by Major Sherjang Thapa, who had been promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, with a small garrison, and he held on to this garrison from February till August. Since the raiders could not capture Skardu, they bypassed Skardu and moved to Kargil. They captured Kargil, they moved towards Zanskar, and they started moving towards Leh. And eventually Indian army moved up, took tanks up the Zojila and cleared all these raiders from this particular area and recaptured. Unfortunately, we could not link up with Skardu, and Skardu garrison had to surrender on 14th August 1948. And consequently, Government of India accepted a ceasefire. And then whatever territory remained with Pakistan's control, as on 1st January 1949, when the ceasefire came, became this Pakistan occupied territory, both of Ladakh as well as JNK. The control under Pakistan, Pakistan initially appointed an Nayab Tehsildar to rule over this area, who arrived in November 47. Then they signed a Karachi agreement with Muslim Conference, a party that had no representative in Gilgit-Baltistan, but represented certain people from Kashmir. That agreement separated Gilgit-Baltistan from rest of Jammu and Kashmir and placed it directly under the control of Pakistani authorities and called it northern areas of Pakistan. In 1952, a joint secretary sitting in Karachi, thousands of kilometers away, would control Gilgit-Baltistan like any colonial power. In 1963, they gave away part of their territory, Shaksgam Valley, to China. The people protested, especially in Hunza, whose territory it was. But no avail. 1967, for the first time, they appointed a resident in Gilgit. 1971, they created an advisory council. In 1971 war, we managed to liberate 804 square kilometers of this territory, which is now with us. So when you go to Ladakh, you must visit this territory, which till 1971 was under Pakistan's occupation. This advisory council was subsequently converted to Northern Areas Council in 1975, then to Northern Areas Legislative Council in 1999. It was only on 7th September 2009 that Gilgit-Baltistan Empowerment and Self-Governance Order was passed, and this area, which was till then called Northern Areas, were renamed as Gilgit-Baltistan, which had been a long pending demand, and a position of Chief Minister, Governor, etc. was created. But these were only ceremonial posts. They had no power with them. And subsequently, of course, Gilgit-Baltistan Order 2018 has been passed, which has virtually made this area a de facto province of Pakistan. So whatever little autonomy they had has also been taken away from them. Consequently, the people have been protesting. Now you can see a protest here. This gentleman who is protesting is Manzoor Parwana of Gilgit-Baltistan United Movement. They have been protesting, seeking liberation from Pakistani control. These are some of the pictures. This is another organization called Balwaristan National Front. Their organization, their rallies, their flag. Again, protests. What are the causes of alienation? Now one would ask, why are they reluctant? Why are they unhappy with Pakistan? And this we need to understand. Firstly, they have no political rights. If you have to contest elections, you have to accept that Gilgit-Baltistan is a part of Pakistan. Even the elected representatives have no real power. So they are actually powerless. So there is, of course, resentment. More importantly, what has happened is, with the removal of state subject rule, outsiders have started coming and flooding this area. And as a result, the local residents have become a minority in their own traditional areas. And this you can see how the populations have increased. The population has increased in this particular area inordinately between 98 and 2011. Of course, the recent census figures have not been declared for this reason. Even the government structures are dominated by outsiders. The chief secretary is outsider, the finance secretary is outsider, the IG police is outsider. Even Northern Light Infantry, which was earlier Gilgit Scouts and had soldiers from this area, now has outsiders. There is an economic exploitation. This area, which is extremely rich in resources, suffers from stark poverty. In fact, this area has enormous gold reserves. When Maharaja was ruling, the vassal states in this area used to pay their tribute to Maharaja in gold dust. They used to filter the river sands and take out gold dust from it, which they used to pay to Maharaja. They also has other mineral resources, including uranium is being talked of. There are enormous tourism potential, huge hydropower potential. There are 32 hydropower plants that are being planned here. Northern Indus Cascade, China is actually trying to build here with collaboration with Pakistan. A huge thousands of megawatts of electricity is planned to be generated. But despite this, you can see that a bridge which had broken in one of the floods, the women are still crossing with a child on 2 wires. Not only that, the area which provides water to rest of Pakistan, here people don't get water for 2 days, 2 weeks at a stretch. This is just last month. The road, you can see what the state of the road was. That road has been blocked, so people are carrying their luggage and walking from Gilgit to Scarborough. Of course, one of the major problems in this particular area is of sectarian conflict. This is one of the Shia majority regions under Pakistan's control. And as a result, there is a Shia-Sunni divide. Shias and Sunnis are clashing. There is attacks on Nur Bakshis. There are attacks on Ismailis. Taliban has made its ingress. So Shia-Sunni conflict has also aggravated. The genesis of sectarian conflict is here nothing but a subset of what is happening in Pakistan, because Pakistan was created on the basis of the fact that Muslims of the subcontinent are a separate nation. Now, when you create a nation state premised on the belief that Muslims of the subcontinent are a separate nation, the next logical question is, who is a Muslim? And Pakistan has been beset with this problem right from 1953. In 1953, Pakistan had anti-Ahmadiyya riots, where 2 serving majors of Pakistan army were killed, lynched to death. And then Pakistan instituted a commission to decide whether Ahmadiyyas are Muslims or not. It was called Munir Kayani Commission. Now that commission sat for 300 days and came to a conclusion that they interviewed 23 sets of ulema and asked them who's a Muslim. And they said that if we accept the definition as given by one set of ulema, we'll have to declare all other 22, including ourselves, as non-Muslims. And they said, since there is no unanimity on who is a Muslim, this commission is not in a position to decide whether Ahmadiyas are Muslims or not Muslims. But subsequently, Pakistan chose the parliamentary means and declared Ahmadiyas as non-Muslims. The sectarian fault lines in Pakistan aggravated. And as a result, when Ziaul Haq came to power, he tried to bring in Sunni Deobandi Islam in Gilgit-Baltistan. And there was protest by people. So he actually brought people from outside and carried out a massacre of Shias. Their villages were burned, their property was burned. Then, of course, the sectarian conflict started. And since then, there have been sectarian conflict virtually every now and then. When Zia died, his death anniversary, people celebrated, then there was again a riot. In 2004-2005, for one entire academic year, no school or academic institution remained open because Shias and Sunnis protested. They said that textbooks do not represent our viewpoint. Shia said that the picture of child praying shows is a different way than what we pray, so it gives a misconception. So there were huge problems. One full year this conflict went on. The Shia leadership under Agha Ziauddin tried to mediate, so he was shot dead. There was again rioting for weeks. There was a curfew. Then in March 2005, Inspector General of Police of Gilgit-Baltistan was killed. And when I say Inspector General of Police, please remember, Inspector General of Police in Pakistan is the highest ranking police official in a province. So IGP Punjab is IGP. It is not like India where you now have hundreds of IGs in one state. You have 50 odd ADGs and some 20 odd DGs in a state. Like in India, and also till 70s, we used to have only one IG in a state. So when IGP killed means the highest ranking. Subsequently, the buses which were coming, the Shias were made to get down and shot dead. So sectarian conflict has been going on since then and goes on relentlessly. Deputy Speaker was killed, the judges were killed. There was a time when foreigners were going on to Nanga Parvat, at base camp of Nanga Parvat at 4,200 meters, foreigners were killed, but their Shia guide was also killed. Similarly, army, colonel, captain, SSP, everyone has been killed. So the violence continues. And there have been times when people had to be airlifted. The tourists were stranded, they had to be airlifted. Any protest, any sectarian killing that takes place in Pakistan, there is a reaction in this particular part. And this is, of course, a protest that you can see in Gilgit against killing of Hazaras in Quetta in Baluchistan. So what happens in Pakistan finds a reaction in this part of the world. Another factor is, as I said, that these people are very, very proud of their pre-Islamic culture, their ancient, very rich culture. They also have very interesting languages which are not spoken by very, very small groups. And what is happening is they feel that fundamentalism is eroding their pre-Islamic cultures. The languages spoken are not being promoted by Pakistan, so they are getting eroded. In Baltistan, there is an attempt to revive Tibetan culture and script. They say that Persian script doesn't represent our language properly. So in Skardu, the people have started writing in Tibetan script. People are desiring greater interaction with Leh and Kargil to revive common cultural identity. This is, of course, the picture of famous Gilgit Buddha I had talked about. You can see this is certain inscriptions. This is Manzoor Parwana again asking for opening of Kargil. You can see these are the animals used for plowing of land. You can see swastik made on their neck called Yandrum. This is a mosque, but you will see swastik all over. This is Baltistan Student Federation flag. You can see swastik. This is, of course, another khanka, a religious place. You won't find this sort of mosque anywhere else in the world. This has a Tibetan, distinct Tibetan identity, culture. Here is again a mosque. You can see on top, on the reef, you have swastiks. It's the Grand Mosque of Khaplu. This is a ruler's headgear. You have Morpunk or the peacock feather. A distinct pre-Islamic cultural identity. Islam doesn't talk of peacock feather or things like that. Now, with the efforts of Jammu Kashmir Study Center, the territories under Jammu Kashmir's, Pakistan's occupation are now well known. I have, I think, overshot the time, so I'll just quickly rush through the territories that are under Chinese occupation. So when we talk of territories under Chinese occupation, people say only Aksai Chin. But the fact is there are more territories under Chinese occupation than Aksai Chin alone. Aksai Chin is this area, what you are seeing on the map. This is about 37,244 square kilometers approximately, because as I said, line of actual control is not known. There's a Kunlun mountain ranges north of Aksai Chin, which separates it from Tarim Basin in Xinjiang province. It's an extremely inhospitable terrain, a high altitude desert, where altitude varies from 4,300 meters to 7,000 meters. Now you can imagine the lowest point is 4,300 meters, where an ordinary human being from Mumbai cannot go just and start living. You have to acclimatize before you can go there and start living. It comprises of many endorheic basins. Endorheic basins, as you know, geologically are those entities from where the water does not egress. Water dies down slowly by evaporation. And consequently, a large number of salt water and soda water lakes have been created. Now this soda water, when it evaporates, soda ash flies out. And it makes this area even more inhospitable because alkaline soil, as you know, does not promote agriculture or vegetation. There are certain rivers known as Karkash, Chipchap, Galwan River, of course, is now in news. Aksai Chin River, they are all there. They originate here. Currently, most of it is under Chinese occupation. Historically, it was eastern part of Ladakh. You can say it was not part of any ancient empire, but Ladakh collected tributes and taxes from traders, graziers, and salt collectors. Traders passed through it, tax they would pay to Ladakh. The graziers would go, they would also have to pay tax. Similarly, salt, there are a lot of salt water lakes, so salt used to be collected, so they also had to pay. But no troops, etc. were deployed there because it was an extremely inhospitable terrain. Positioning troops or officials permanently was considered uneconomical, unwieldy. So as a result, it was used as a transit route between Tibet and Tarim Basin, that is Xinjiang, by armies as well as traders. And Treaty of Tingmusgang, which was signed between Ladakh and Tibet in 1684, put it under Ladakh. It said that Aksai Chin is part of Ladakh. But despite this, what happened in 1717 when Zungar Khanate, which was in Xinjiang, captured Tibet, it actually passed through this territory. The Treaty of Chushul, which was signed in 1942 between Tibet and Maharaja, also decided to stick to the old established frontiers. That is what it was, but it was unfortunately not mapped. Subsequently, the British proposed to China that we need to delineate the boundary. Chinese said there was no need. In 1848, Tibet formalized the border. The Chinese official maps issued in 1853, 1917, and 1919 accepted this border, which we actually claim today. The British first proposed a line called Johnson Line. This was created by a geographer who was actually in Survey of India, who had taken employment with Maharaja. He signed a Johnson Line which delineated Maharaja's territory with Chinese territory. This Johnson Line was beyond what we claim today. What India's map is today, actually it went beyond, and it was far north of the boundary line which we show on the map. In fact, north of it is a place called Shahidullah, where Maharaja constructed a fort because of this Johnson Line and positioned his troops there to collect taxes from traders, etc., who were coming. But it was such an inhospitable area that within a year, he decided that it is not feasible to keep the soldiers there, and they were withdrawn. Subsequently, Britishers decided that yes, Johnson Line is not defendable. So they probably came to Johnson-Ardagh Line, which is the line on which Indian border is defined. This was actually a line which was modified, Johnson Line modified by Major General John Ardagh, the Director of Military Intelligence. And as a result, it is known as Johnson-Ardagh Line. Subsequently, Britishers also proposed a MacDonald-Macartney Line, which was further inside. But all these lines were proposed to China, but no response was received from China. And as a result, till 1908, Britishers would sometimes use MacDonald-Macartney Line, sometimes they'll use Johnson-Ardagh Line. But from 1911 onwards, they have been using Johnson-Ardagh Line. 1917 to 1933, the Postal Atlas of China showed the boundary of China according to Johnson-Ardagh Line. But despite this, the Britishers never positioned soldiers, and as a result, in 1940-41, they were surprised to know that some Soviet officials were carrying out survey in Aksai Chin. And they were carrying out survey in Aksai Chin for whom? They were doing it for Sheng Shikai, who was a warlord in Xinjiang. So Britishers protested. Since independence, we have used this line to delineate our independent borders. But again, we also did not position soldiers. And as a result, we were shocked to know that in 1956, a road had already been constructed through this, connecting Xinjiang with Tibet. And this is this Aksai Chin road that you are seeing. This is the Chinese postal map. You can see 1917. You can see the boundary of Jammu and Kashmir as it is. It is very clearly given. The current status, the most of it is under Chinese occupation since 62. Most of the part is administered as Hotan County, which lies in the southwestern part of Hotan Prefecture of Xinjiang Autonomous Region. A lot of people think that it is a question between Tibet and us. No, unfortunately, this is part of Xinjiang, not part of Tibet. Only some part in south and east is part of Tibetan Autonomous Region. Largely uninhabited, except for divided village of Demchok. Then there is, of course, a military station of PLA called Tianchu Hai. Then you have Telangtan. These are military stations at a very, very high altitude, as you know, 4,890 meters. Now, who would live there? It requires enormous acclimatization. But since a road passes through it, they have established hotels, gas stations, etc., where people come and stay. This is Karkash River, where white jade stone is found, which actually originates in Aksai Chin and goes into Central Asia. It's a fairly medium-sized river. It goes and then joins another river. This is Pengongso Lake. You all must have seen it or visited it. Tianchu Hai Lake. Then besides Aksai Chin, we also had territories which are now under Chinese occupation, and this we need to understand. This is known as Trans-Karakoram tracts. These were the tracts which were beyond Karakoram mountains. And there were three components of it. One was Shaksgam Valley, which is the area which China has given it to Pakistan has given it to China in 63, as you know. There is Raskam Valley, which is north of it. And then there is Tagdumbash Pamir. This was an area which touched Soviet Union in those days, which is again now within. It's an area which is surrounded by Kunlun Mountains, Karkash, and south, and Broad Peak, K2 and Gasherbom on south. It's also an extremely inhospitable terrain. Yarkand River and Shaksgam River originate here. It is also under Chinese occupation and is part of Kashgar region of Xinjiang. Only significant habitation here is in Dafdar, which is in Tagdumbash Pamir. Otherwise, all other areas are uninhabited. Dafdar is at an altitude of 3,400 meters. Historically, people from Hunza used to go there and carry out seasonal cultivation. That is, when summer was there, they would go and cultivate there and take their cattle and go there for grazing. Now, Hunza had a very troubled or a very intriguing history. Hunza had a dual suzerainty. The Mir of Hunza or the ruler of Hunza used to pay tribute to Maharaja of Kashmir, but he also used to pay tribute to the King of China. And consequently, in 1899, the Britishers proposed that China relinquishes its suzerainty over Hunza, and in return, Hunza gives up Tagdumbash, most of Tagdumbash and Raskam. When Chinese did not respond, British said that this is an acquiescence. And as a result, both these lines, thereafter, Tagdumbash and Raskam is not included in Indian map. But both MacDonald line as well as Johnson-Ardagh line included Shaksgam Valley in India. The earlier Johnson line, which Johnson had delineated, showed even Raskam Valley as part of India. Now you'll see this map. If you see India's map, the official map today, actually the boundary goes along this shaded portion. This is Shaksgam Valley, and this area on top, which you are seeing from bound by this red one, is Raskam Valley, which we do not claim now. But if you'll see old Indian maps, they will invariably show you this line. Similarly, north of this was Tagdumbash Pamir, which touched Soviet Union. In fact, people used to pay taxes to Mir of Hunza till 1937. Pandit Nehru, as late as 26th October 1947, had stated that Jammu and Kashmir's northern borders touched USSR. That implied that Tagdumbash was part of Jammu and Kashmir. But after 62 war, there was a convergence of China-Pakistan, and in 63, Pakistan handed over Shaksgam to China as part of Sino-Pak agreement. And this part has become part of China. Just the last piece of territory, which also belongs to us, is a village called Minsar, which is deep inside Tibet. It is actually 32 miles west of Mount Kailash. It has been part of Ladakh for centuries. Centuries means for over 500 years it was part of Ladakh. In 1684, when the Treaty of Tingos Gang was signed, it said that Minsar will remain part of Ladakh. Revenue from this village was used to maintain the Mansarovar pilgrimage. The Mansarovar main pilgrimage used to go from Demchok, and these pilgrims used to be maintained by this. This became part of Jammu and Kashmir as Ladakh came under Maharaja's rule. In 1865, when Johnson went for his survey, he talked of Minsar located beyond Rudok and Gartok, and the revenue collected being 500 rupees per annum. This is the position of Minsar. You can see here Minsar is there, and this is Mansarovar, Kailash is here. Even after independence, in 1950, an officer of the Jammu Kashmir went there and met the people and knew how much tax was being collected, etc. This report was sent to Government of India. Subsequently, when negotiations started between India and China, we did not discuss Minsar from 54 to 62. Revenue was collected till 60s, people say, and subsequently, we have lost it. After 62, no discussions have taken place on it. It is located on Highway 219, which is actually part of this. I'll just briefly touch upon what is the strategic significance of Chinese occupied this territory of Ladakh, because you'll say there nobody lives there. What is the thing? It's such an inhospitable terrain. You need to understand that Leh was the highest crossroad of the world. It's been termed highest crossroad of the world by Europeans in 19th century. The trade worth lakhs of rupees in those days used to be carried out through Leh. There were 6 trade routes going there from there. 2 routes used to go to Eurasian heartland through Yarkand. 2 routes would go to Lhasa. 1 route would go from Manali to Punjab and go to Iran and beyond to West Asia. Another route would go from Srinagar to Afghanistan. From that highest crossroads, today Leh has been converted as an isolated corner of India, because occupation of China occupied territory of Ladakh has denied India its traditional access to Eurasian heartland. And those of you who are well aware with strategy, geostrategy would remember there's a Mackinder's theory that whoever controls the heartland controls the world. So heartland of the Eurasia is actually the powerful section for resource-rich region which has to be controlled. So China occupied territory of Ladakh has also denied India its traditional spiritual space in Tibet, because Tibet is where our spiritual spaces, there Mansarovar, Kailash, etc. That's not. This is just a brief chronology how Ladakh has been isolated. I don't wish to read it out because paucity of time. I know I have overshot my time, so I just want to say this is the traditional Silk Route. You can see how things would come and how Ladakh played a very, very important role. But last point which I would like to make, and very, very categorical, a nation does not lose its territory just because somebody else has occupied it. A nation loses its territory only when it is forgotten. As long as you remember, as long as it remains in your subconscious mind, it remains in your conscious mind, it is your territory. Please remember, the Jews were sent out of Israel for thousands of years, but every year they would meet next year in Jerusalem. So they kept the memory of Jerusalem alive. As long as you keep doing that, this territory will remain yours. And we have tried to publish this book for this particular region. This was published this year only on occupied territories of Bharat. And I would request those of you with interest in it should try and read it and find answers to some of your questions which you may have. Thank you so much. I have overshot my time. I'll take on any questions that you may have. Thank you.
Yes, we are going to hold such programs very often so that we are repeatedly reminded, that this territory belongs to us and we have to get it back. Before we go to the question answer session, I want to welcome, we have Ranjit ji from JKSC Mumbai. Sumit, go ahead, unmute yourself and ask.
Namaste, Alok ji. My question is that, has this facade of autonomy or independence of the so-called Azad Jammu and Kashmir, has it been dropped after Pakistan published its map recently, which was, primarily a rhetorical map, so to say, but despite that? And if so, how can India use this point on all possible international fora to expose Pakistan? Thank you.
See, Pakistan has officially not dropped this particular thing, but what they are trying to say is that AJK and Gilgit-Baltistan are 2 separate entities. And that's what they are trying to say. They are trying to say that Gilgit-Baltistan is not part of the Jammu and Kashmir conflict. And that is the latest position they are trying to do. And that they are trying to make Gilgit-Baltistan the 5th province of Pakistan. And this is, of course, weakened their legal and constitutional position. And that's what we need to publicize it. That's what we need to tell. Because internationally, they have been trying to say that Jammu and Kashmir is Azad and this is what they're trying to project. So that needs to go. And that is what we need to do. And that is what we are trying to highlight. And that's why I went into history, because one of the Pakistan's point of view is that historically this was not part of Jammu and Kashmir, which I have tried to disprove. The second reason why they are actually in a great hurry is because China is pressurizing them, because we have been telling China that CPEC passes through a territory which according to Chinese version is a disputed territory. According to India's constitution is an integral part of India, and according to Pakistan's constitution is not a part of Pakistan. So how can a CPEC go through this without taking our concurrence? And as a result, Pakistan has been under pressure to provide it some sort of a constitutional cover that this CPEC is going. And that's why I think you see there is immense pressure in Pakistan to amalgamate it. And as they remove autonomy even from Mirpur Muzaffarabad, or AJK as they call it, there is also protest. And this is one of the reasons why you're seeing that in this particular area also there have been recently very frequent protests that have been there against Pakistan's rule.
Sumit, did you get your answer? Shall we go ahead?
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Our next question is from Suresh Regeji. Suresh Regeji, please unmute yourself.
Yeah. My question is, which I had put on the chat, is it appears that the Ladakh area occupied, or Aksai chain area occupied by China, has no population, no natural resources, nor any tourism potential. China's interest is in that area is because mainly of the trade route and because of the CPEC, which gives it access to Gadar and from then onwards to the Central Asia and Europe. If we focus on regaining POJK and POL, China's interest in Aksai chain will automatically be diminished. Now, this was my original question, which I put on the chat group, but subsequently you clarified on the trade routes passing through Ladakh. I don't know whether it still has relevance today, because today it is established that the cost of transportation for trade is far lower through sea routes than the land routes, especially going through such difficult mountainous terrain. So can you clarify that? That is one question. And second one is, if you can also enlighten us on Nepal's claim on Lipul Lake and these are not occupied, but now being claimed by, these are in our possession, but now being claimed by Nepal.
I'll just briefly touch on both these issues. Firstly, we need to understand that China's claim on Ladakh actually does not affect CPEC. CPEC route goes quite differently. CPEC actually goes across Gilgit-Baltistan, that is Pakistan occupied territory of Ladakh. It goes from Kashgar to Gwadar. Whereas Aksai chain is important to China because the road from Xinjiang to Tibet goes through this. And this is one of the major roads which goes into Tibet. Till they actually built the railway line, etc. This was one of the major roads connecting China with Tibet. So that was important. As far as trade routes are concerned, these trade routes are still important because if we can get an access, and of course, if we have some sort of a settlement with China and these trade routes get revived, these trade routes actually go into the Eurasian heartland. And of course, Eurasian heartland is actually a big market as well as also a big resource-rich region. Now, the resources of this region have to come by road. If you have to bring them by sea again, then you have to take them by road to some place and then bring them. Like for example, Afghanistan today. Afghanistan has huge mineral resources. But how does India bring them? You can't bring them through Pakistan. You now have problems with Iran also because you can't bring them through Iran because Iran has also now joined Pakistan. So the alternative was only to bring them through China or something like that. That also is not feasible as of now. As regards Nepal is concerned, we need to understand that there was a Treaty of Sigauli which was signed. Nepal at one stage occupied the Kumaon, Garhwal, Darjeeling, etc. Nepal's territory was larger. But when the Britishers defeated Nepal, they signed a Treaty of Sigauli which defined their boundaries. Now, this boundary was defined on a particular river whose origin is disputed. Now, we say that the river originates here in east and their dispute originates in the stream which is actually originating in west. And that's where the contestation has been. But the fact is that in 1954, Lipul Lake was identified as one of the transit points. There was no complaint from Nepal. It's all a subsequent creation. we need to understand that in Nepal, there is a certain section of Nepalese elite, which is based in Kathmandu, which has a vested interest in promoting anti-Indiaism. And they are the ones who have done this. Sust and Kalapani, these are the only issues which are between Nepal and India. And hopefully now I think better sense is prevailing. But they have created a problem which is going to linger on for years, because they have included it in constitution. They have tried to put it into their symbols and things like that. That will be a little complicated. For subsequently saner governments also to repeal it will be a little difficult for them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Kapilji, you can ask your question, unmute yourself and ask the question. Kapil.
Yeah, thank you. Alokji, thanks for the wonderful informative session. What I like, along with your knowledge, is the passion with which you speak about POJK. And I wait for the day when every Indian speaks with passion equal to you, if not more than you, when it comes to POJK. My question to you is this. In United Nations and in media, we have been hearing one statement: Pakistan is exporting terror from its soil. Yeah, that's the statement all of us have heard many times. What is your view, and what do you think if the alternative statement is Pakistan is exporting terror not just from its soil, but it is also exporting terror to India using Indian soil? Do you think that statement is detrimental to India's interest, or it would help India's interest?
I think this statement will not be detrimental, but will not support our point very much, because the more you dilute that it's also exporting from it. Right now you say Pakistan is the hub of terror. That actually is a statement which sells globally. And today the globe acknowledges that Pakistan is the hub of terror. In fact, today you can read accounts on Pakistani newspapers when Pakistanis travel abroad, and they say how different they are treated vis-a-vis an Indian passport holder. So I think the world has acknowledged Pakistan as a hub of terror. We can highlight that our occupied territory is also being radicalized and being used as for sheltering terror camps, and that we have done. When we have carried out cross-border strikes and cross-line of control strikes, we have indicated it to the world that terror camps are being housed in this territory. But I think trying to say this will not really make a very significant difference. And the more the number of words you add in a statement, the statement's impact gets diluted. That's what is my personal belief. People may disagree or may have a different viewpoint on it.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Alokji, I have two questions for you. One is the way we had the Kartarpur corridor, can we have a Sharda Peeth corridor, and what do you think about it? And another one is your favorite topic, which I want some light that you should throw on it, is how do we use soft diplomacy in these regions till we succeed in getting the regions back? Thank you.
See, as far as Kartarpur corridor is concerned, as I said, Kartarpur corridor was actually a master stroke of Imran Khan. He has actually, he gave a proposal which we could not have said no to. But it actually helps ISI to recruit people and do that. And I think now that Kartarpur corridor is there, we must try and make best of it. We must now use it as much as we can use it. But as I said, Kartarpur-like corridor needs to be created for Sharda also.
Yes.
And that I'm a very strong supporter of that we should do that. And as I said, if you have to win this area, you have to win the people. And this fact must be understood. And please understand that if you have to win the people, you cannot have a very extreme bigoted or hardline stance which you can have. So religious pluralism will have to be accepted. That part has to be understood. Considering Islam as a monolith needs to go away. We need to understand the different strands of Islam, because there are fissures in Islam, and that we need to understand, because globally it's not, Islam is not a monolith. We need to understand. We need to understand the culture of this region. We also need to understand the languages. And once we understand the languages, JKSC is doing a wonderful yeoman service by creating Sheena dictionary and things like that. We need to have television stations, radio stations, broadcasting, telecasting programs in these languages, so that the people understand that while Pakistan is not promoting their culture and languages, we are trying to promote that. And that has got to be done. And that needs to be done subtly. That requires a very, very nuanced approach how to approach the people. I still remember in 2007, Manzoor Parwana had come to India, and he had said that if we are Indian citizens, why don't you give us reservation in IIT, IIMs, because Pakistan don't give us anything. We have seats in Jammu Kashmir Assembly for people from POJK, but we never gave them seats. Why can't we conduct elections? We can conduct elections, and those people who have migrated from there can vote. We can have constituencies which are split. You have a constituency whose half area is across line of control, half area is this side. You have an election, but the constituency recognizes the whole thing. So we need to have a greater. See, let me be very clear. Whatever may have been greatness of Pandit Nehru, as far as Gilgit-Baltistan was concerned, I think his vision was flawed. I generally do not criticize Pandit Nehru otherwise, but on Gilgit-Baltistan, his vision was flawed. Let me be very emphatic on it. He did not realize the strategic significance of Gilgit-Baltistan. He did not pursue the area as emphatically as it should have been. And subsequently, not only Pandit Nehru, even subsequently, the India's Prime Minister Indira Gandhi in 71 thought that line of control is good enough for us. That's what Haksars and Dhars told her, and she accepted. The fact is, with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, they were ready to negotiate on line of control, which is problematic. It's only now that people are understanding. I must tell you very honestly, when I started working on this area, I also myself did not know much. 2003, 2004, when I started, I hardly knew much. Then I started reading and all doing that. And when we started our book, first book came out, the then Defense Minister of India was not ready to release it. He said, I don't want to touch it. He was so concerned about it. So that has been the issue. So I think we need to have a nuanced approach, and that's what is important. That's what I'm trying to say, because this territory is extremely important. The day we start controlling this territory, we would be a great power, because that will open our access to Eurasia. That is what is required, because right now we are blocked. People don't understand what Pakistan has done. Pakistan has blocked our access to West. China has blocked our access to North, and we are actually bottled up. So as a result, despite being an Asian power, we are virtually cut off from Asia. Our only opening is East, and that's why we say, look East, act East. We're trying to look East, but that's all. Otherwise, we are cut off. Oceans, of course, are natural connectors, and oceans connect us to everyone. But we are otherwise not an island, but we are being converted into an island because of hostile powers occupying the territory to our west and north. That's one of the issues that is there.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who wants to ask a question, yes, or shall I just...
Yes. Shakti ji, may I? Anita Pandit.
Yes, please go ahead, Pandit. Anita ji, please go ahead.
Yeah. I would just like to ask Alok ji. The thing is that we have never been, taking ourselves as a very important power in the international arena. And secondly, we were just defending. We are always only just defending us from Pakistan, saving ourselves from attacks from Pakistan, from China, and now from Nepal, and maybe smaller other some countries. How can we now, in the new scenario under the present government, we have suddenly woken up to our identity as what role we can play in the international politics. And now we are also taking action accordingly. So now how can we, in international politics, we can take this subject of Pakistan and China, if we take a lead, I'm sure, the major democracies of the world can unite under one umbrella, and we should see that what are these rogue countries. We can safely say now China is also a rogue country now, soon going to be, because they have no friends. Everybody is their enemy at the moment, except for one or two. Maybe they have some this thing with Russia and maybe Pakistan. So how can we now assert ourselves with the limited financial powers that we have, but the recognition and the hope in the world that India is going to rise and they are going to definitely do something? Can you throw some light on that, how we can work on this to carry this to the international arena?
See, firstly, we need to understand that international power emanates from the tools that a country possesses. It's intrinsic power. And a country's intrinsic power has three major components. One is, of course, your military power. If you are a militarily a very strong power, you project your power. The second is if you are an economic power. If you have an economic power, you give doles, you give that. Then of course, third is your diplomatic power and a soft power. And I don't agree that we have never asserted ourselves. Let me be very honest with you and be forthright, because nowadays one of the problems is that people have become so partisan that we do not take a dispassionate view. The fact is, it's not that after independence we did not take ourselves as an international power. Post-independence, we did emerge as an international power, and it's a fact that in 50s, India's stature internationally was fairly wrong. But it was a hollow power. We did not have a military power. We did not have an economic power. We had a diplomatic power. We had a good soft power because of this non-alignment. If you remember, when Vietnam conflict took place, we were the arbiters. When Korean crisis took place, we were the arbiters. There was one from each bloc, and India was considered as a neutral country. If you see in 50s, anyone, if somebody came from China to go to West, they would come first to India and then go there. Chow En Lai till 50s, whenever he went abroad, would first come to Delhi and then go to Beijing. So it is not that we did not have power at some stage, but that power was hollow. And as a result, when we crashed, when the 62 war happened, we crashed. From the high pedestal where we were, we actually came crumbling down because we did not have strength. Now, subsequently, we became very, very introvert. And the fact is, the apogee was when Indira Gandhi in 71 wanted Bangladesh crisis was happening, but in United Nations, not even anybody was ready to support other than Bhutan and Soviet bloc. No, not a single country was ready to support you. Even Yugoslavia, which was founder member of non-alignment movement, voted against you. So we reached that stage. From that, now we have started rising. We have started rising. Atalji's time, we did the nuclear explosion, which has given us a strength. And now we have emerged as a big power. Especially in NDA 1, we have positioned ourselves globally. And that is where the point is that we, besides our military power and economic power, which is growing, we also need to promote our soft power. And it is soft power where I say that we need to have our skills, where we need to show to the world that we are a responsible power. And that's where I said we should not always have a very, very extreme, bigoted or rigid view. We should always show ourselves as mature, democratic society. That is what is very important, because the world today recognizes India's military power, recognizes India's economic power. And so now if we play our cards very well, we would emerge. And China has been isolated, that's a fact, but not completely isolated. Please remember, China still possesses two very powerful tools. It is a very strong military power, but more importantly, today in purchasing power parity terms, China is the biggest economy of the world. It has actually overtaken US as the biggest economy in PPP terms. So it has a huge financial power. Unfortunately, during this 1 year, we have had a huge setback as far as economy is concerned. The last quarter, our economy shrank the maximum as far as the large economies of the world were concerned. Hopefully, we will revive very soon and we'll come forward. So to take over as economic power, we need to have all these components of diplomacy we need. And I think we are progressing on the right track. And I am quite optimistic that sooner or later, these occupied territories will be back with us.
We have the last question of the day. Nidhi Bhagwanaji, please go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to continue on the Sharda Peeth corridor issue. Today, when I was doing my lecture, a very interesting perspective came up. So there is this, like Alokji mentioned, there is a ISI angle to the Kartarpur corridor. And if you see the feed on social media, lots of people are saying, if Sikhs can have Kartarpur corridors, why can't Hindus have Sharda Peeth? So that is, we all have to be very careful when we ask for a Sharda Peeth corridor. We should not fall into this binary of, Sikhs versus Hindus and Gurudwara versus Sharda Peeth. Many a times I've seen this happening and people getting very, very, they're taking these polls. And today one professor from the Haryana University asked me, why should we ask for a corridor when the area is already ours? Kartarpur is already in Pakistan, I mean IB ke is taraf hai, while wo LOC ke is taraf hai. So there has to be we all have to understand these minor things. What does Mr. Alok Bansal say about that?
as I have said, that this territory is ours and we will get it. And I made it very categorical when I made that statement. I said, pending our occupation of that territory, but I still feel that Sharda corridor is essential because there are more pluses. Unlike in Kartarpur cases, here there are pluses because this area has been denuded of Hindus. So if the people start going, people of this area, the Muslims also have an interest in that because they are also culturally connected with that. So if the temple starts revived and the salience of the temple is established in this remote part of the country, people will start taking pride in their history. They would realize, because that place is still known as Sharda, that subdivision is Sharda subdivision. So they would take pride in their history. And once that temple starts functioning and people start coming and people in thousands and lakhs start coming, the economy will depend on that. And then they will start identifying themselves with the temple and the historical background of that place. Of course, that ISI pitfall will always remain. I am not trying to say that. But remember, ISI's effectiveness in that place will be less than in Kartarpur, where they're in Pakistan heartland. Because in this particular area, the local population is not totally with them. There are people who are against them. So ISI would have to be a little more cautious to recruit people. And ISI at this point of time sees Sikhs as a softer target because they feel that they can revive that Khalistan movement again. Now to look into Hindus and find that sort of thing will be much more difficult. So it will not be that weaker thing.
Yeah.
As I said, it's a pending thing. It's not a permanent thing. I agree it's our territory, but till we regain that territory, since we are already running a bus and doing all sorts of things, why can't we do this also?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Advocate Sumit Deshpande from Jammu Kashmir Center, Mumbai. Alok ji, at the outset, I would like to say, on behalf of everyone present in this webinar, that today's talk by you was extremely enlightening one. This talk is just a glimpse, I would like to say, of Alok ji's tapasya on the geostrategic and other aspects pertaining to this issue, which is close to all our hearts.